Zyren crouched on the jagged cliffs of Virelia's northern ridge, his small frame barely discernible against the dense thickets of iridescent foliage. Below, the valley shimmered with the muted glow of bioluminescent moss, painting the alien terrain in eerie blues and greens. His antennae twitched with unease as the faint hum of approaching engines reached his sensitive ears. The humans had arrived. Morik's voice crackled through the comlink, low and steady. Zyren, remember Rule 1. Observation only. No interaction. Zyren swallowed a surge of excitement. Rule 1. The ancient edict etched into every Virelian's survival guide: never provoke humans. It was a simple instruction with profound implications. One misstep could spell the end of their tiny civilization. I see them, Morik, Zyren whispered, pressing closer to the rock, his multifaceted eyes scanning the enormous metallic ship descending into the valley. Its hull gleamed under Virelia's twin suns, far larger than any vessel Zyren had seen before. Every movement, every vibration of the ship, radiated power. Humans were not creatures to underestimate. Morik's tone tightened. Don't approach. Their technology is beyond our comprehension. Even observation carries risk. Zyren's curiosity bristled. He had studied humans from afar for cycles, poring over intercepted transmissions and old exploration logs. They were unpredictable, adaptable, and terrifyingly clever. But seeing them in person, the humans exuded an aura of authority that sent a shiver down his spine. He could not resist the pull to move closer, to witness firsthand the beings who had rewritten the fates of worlds they touched. The ship's landing disturbed the valley floor, displacing flocks of iridescent Virelian avians. From the observation point, Zyren counted at least 7 figures moving with methodical precision. Male humans, by their builds and posture, each one focused on tasks unknown. They carried instruments, devices that pulsed with energy, and every gesture revealed intent. They were exploring, yes, but Zyren could feel a subtle dominance in their movements, a quiet assertion that the world bent to their will. He pressed a hand to his chest plate, feeling the rapid pulse beneath. Morik, do you think they know we're here? Silence, then a sigh. Possibly. Humans perceive far more than they reveal. We are small. We are insignificant to them. That is why we must stay invisible. Zyren's mind raced. Insignificant? The word felt like a challenge rather than a reassurance. For his species, every encounter with a larger entity was a gamble, a test of cunning and patience. He thought of his ancestors, small and clever, surviving countless predators by mastering patience, observation, and discretion. Yet humans seemed to defy every measure of predictability. He adjusted his vantage point, sliding along the cliff edge until he was nearly directly above the human landing site. From here, he could see details that his scans had only hinted at. The humans' precise movements, the way they communicated with gestures and tones he could barely decipher, their meticulous cataloging of the alien flora and minerals. He imagined the thoughts running through their minds, calculations, strategies, curiosity, each one a potential threat if provoked. A sudden crack echoed across the ridge. Zyren froze, antennae quivering. A fragment of rock had shifted beneath him, sending a cascade of pebbles tumbling down the cliff. One landed near a human's foot. The man paused, glanced down, and then continued, utterly unbothered. Zyren's chest tightened. Human patience was extraordinary. Even when confronted, they did not panic, they did not strike. Zyren, Morik's voice urged, sharp now. You're too close. Return to observation point echo. Reluctantly, Zyren slid back, maintaining a careful watch. His mind, however, refused to retreat. They are so deliberate and aware. Each human seemed like a living engine of thought and adaptability. They could respond to any threat, outthink any trap, and yet, somehow, they moved with an almost imperceptible grace. Why are they here? Zyren murmured, almost to himself. They explore, Morik said. They always explore. But never underestimate them. They learn, they adapt, and they destroy what they cannot comprehend. Zyren's eyes narrowed. The humans were not just explorers, they were architects of consequence. His species, small and clever, could perhaps outwit lesser beings. But humans? There was an intelligence there that made every instinct in his body scream caution. And yet, despite every warning, he felt a thrill coursing through his circuits. The story of survival was unfolding before him, and he would be a witness, or a casualty. The humans began erecting equipment, instruments that glowed and hummed with energy. Zyren noted each placement, each calibration. Mork's voice was calm now, almost weary. Remember, Zyren. Observation. Rule 1. Never provoke humans. That is the only path to survival. Zyren nodded, though the corners of his mouth twitched in defiance of caution. There was so much to learn, so much to see, and yet the shadow of danger loomed, silent and omnipresent. The humans were powerful, patient, and unknowable. And the small species of Virelia, clever though they were, had but one rule to survive. As the sun dipped behind jagged peaks, casting the valley into twilight, Zyren pressed closer to the cliff's edge once more. The humans moved below, oblivious to the tiny eyes upon them, the fragile lives watching with equal parts fear and fascination. And in that moment, Zyren understood the essence of Rule 1. Survival depended not on strength, but on restraint, and on the humility to recognize that some forces in the universe were simply beyond provocation. A low hum vibrated through the ridge. Zyren's antennae twitched. Somewhere, deep in the valley, something had shifted. The humans were not aware yet, but Zyren sensed it. Something was coming, a test of wit, patience, and courage. And the small species of Virelia would have to navigate it carefully. For the first time, he truly feared and truly respected the humans. Zyren's curiosity gnawed at him like a persistent tremor. From his hidden vantage among the glowing ferns, he watched the humans move with meticulous precision, arranging strange devices across the valley floor. Each instrument hummed and pulsed, scanning, recording, and seemingly calculating the alien environment. Their efficiency was unnerving. Every movement deliberate, every gesture purposeful. "Mork," Zyren whispered through the comm link, voice tight with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "They're observing everything. They're cataloging the valley. Every plant, every stone. I think they know more about Virelia in a few hours than we've recorded in cycles." Mork's sigh crackled through the link. "Zyren, observation only. That is the command. Interference is not permitted. Humans are not creatures to provoke." Zyren's fingers twitched. He knew the rule. He had recited it countless times in training. Yet the urge to act, to test their intelligence, to assert his species' presence, was overwhelming. A plan formed, reckless yet tempting. A minor sabotage, subtle enough to remain undetected, but enough to gauge the humans' reaction. It was daring, dangerous, and exactly the kind of mistake Rule 1 warned against. He waited until the humans moved to another section of the valley. With cautious steps, Zyren approached one of the humming devices. He examined it, scanning for vulnerabilities. Tiny alien fingers brushed across its surface, just enough to alter a delicate alignment. Then he retreated to his hiding place, heart hammering. Minutes passed. Nothing. No explosion, no warning. The humans continued their work, unaware, or perhaps fully aware and unconcerned. Zyren squinted, trying to read the subtle cues of their reactions. But humans, he realized with a mixture of awe and fear, were masters of patience. They did not panic. They did not lash out. They corrected, adjusted, and proceeded. The device hummed in perfect cadence once more, as if mocking his interference. "Mork," Zyren murmured. "They're unflappable. Nothing phases them. Even when confronted, they remain precise, calculated." "That is why they are dangerous," Mork said, voice firm. "Even in apparent calm, humans are capable of adapting to anything. That is their strength. Do you understand why Rule 1 exists?" "Yes," Zyren admitted reluctantly. Because provoking them, any action, no matter how small, could escalate beyond our control. But I wanted to see how far we could test them. Curiosity will not save you, Zyren. Only caution. Mork's words were not a reprimand. They were a warning forged through centuries of survival. Zyren's gaze returned to the humans. One of them, a tall male with a square jaw and intense focus, noticed something odd. He paused, crouched, and scanned the device Zyren had tampered with. But instead of anger or alarm, he simply adjusted a dial, tapped a sequence on a handheld scanner, and returned to his task. Zyren's chest constricted. They detected it. And yet they did nothing. They did not retaliate. The realization was both terrifying and enlightening. Humans possessed an intelligence that was not just reactive, it was anticipatory, controlled, and unyielding. Their patience was a weapon. Their strength was not measured in raw power, but in precision, understanding, and the ability to remain composed under provocation. Mork, I underestimated them, Zyren said quietly. I thought we could observe, test, maybe even manipulate. But they are beyond any measure I have known. Beyond measure indeed, Mork replied. And that is exactly why the Virelian Survival Guide has only one rule. There is no second. Rule 1 is all that matters. Never provoke humans. Ever. Zyren pressed closer to the ridge, keeping his form hidden among the ferns. He studied the humans' coordination, their seamless communication, their effortless handling of complex tools. Every action seemed deliberate, yet nothing felt rigid. They adapted fluidly to the terrain, responding to subtle changes in light, wind, and movement. One misstep could have been catastrophic, but the humans operated in harmony with the unpredictable world around them. The small Virelian's antennae twitched with a mixture of fear and admiration. He realized something crucial. Survival for his species was not about clever tricks or traps, but about restraint, observation, and respect for forces far greater than their own. The humans were living proof that power and intelligence often came wrapped in patience rather than aggression. A sudden crack echoed behind him, a falling branch. Zyren froze, muscles coiled. A human turned, scanning the trees with sharp eyes, but saw nothing. The intruder remained invisible, unseen, and yet entirely detected in some subtle, incomprehensible way. Zyren understood in that moment the terrifying edge humans possessed. They could perceive, adapt, and act with foresight that small creatures like him could barely grasp. Mork, Zyren said, voice low. I see now we are not the hunters. We are the observed. We are insignificant to them. And yet, we survive if we respect their presence. Correct, Mork affirmed. And that is the lesson. Observation is survival. Interference is death. Rule 1 is not just a guideline, it is the lifeline of our species. The humans continued their work, unaware of the tiny observer watching from the shadows. Zyren felt a strange blend of fear and exhilaration. The encounter was a lesson in humility, a confrontation with forces beyond his understanding. And yet, it was also a revelation. Perhaps, in time, his species could learn not to provoke, not to test, and not to challenge, but only to respect and survive. As twilight deepened, painting the valley in muted violets and greens, Zyren withdrew to the higher cliffs. The human's presence was a constant, humming reminder of the power that lurked just beyond their comprehension. And as the stars began to pierce the alien sky, he whispered to himself, a vow both fearful and resolute. Never provoke humans. There is no second rule. There is only survival. The valley lay in quiet anticipation, yet the subtle vibrations beneath Zyren's feet told a different story. Humans moved with uncanny precision, every step measured, every gesture deliberate, as if they could read the world itself and bend it to their design. Zyren perched on a moss-covered ledge, antennae twitching, eyes wide as he observed. Mork remained behind him, his gaze steady, radiating the calm caution of a lifetime spent surviving larger, stronger predators. They're changing their instruments, Zyren whispered. I think they're mapping something. Perhaps the underground networks, or the currents of the valley's magnetic field. Correct, Morag replied. They analyze what we cannot see, predict what we cannot anticipate. Every adjustment is a calculation. Observe, do not intervene. That is all we can do. Zyren's mind raced. The urge to test their limits, the same dangerous impulse that had nearly compromised them before. Not again. Yet he understood the lesson more deeply now. Humans did not react in predictable ways. They responded to patterns, to subtleties, to the smallest shifts in the environment. To provoke them was to invite disaster. Still, a shadow of doubt crept in. Morag, what if observing is not enough? What if we need to influence them to ensure our survival? Morag's eyes narrowed. Influence humans? That is arrogance. Their strength lies in patience and adaptability. Your interference before almost revealed us. Remember how they adjusted unnoticed? That is why Rule 1 exists, Zyren. One action, one misstep, can destroy everything we've preserved for generations. The humans, oblivious to the tiny eyes upon them, continued their work. Zyren noted every gesture. A male engineer bending over a strange plant, manipulating a device with calm hands. A captain observing the readings with an almost imperceptible frown, then gesturing for another human to reposition a scanning array. Each movement exuded competence, patience, and unspoken authority. Zyren's admiration mixed uneasily with fear. A sudden tremor ran through the ground. A loose rock tumbled, clattering into a shallow creek below. One of the humans turned sharply, scanning the ridge with a piercing gaze. Zyren froze, heart hammering. The human's eyes seemed to sweep the landscape with uncanny perception, detecting the disturbance, sensing a presence, yet remaining unalarmed. They did not investigate, did not react with hostility. They simply continued their work, unflinching. They can perceive more than we realize, Zyren muttered. Even when they do not act, they notice everything. Morag's antennae twitched, and that perception is lethal. Remember, Zyren, patience is their weapon. Their intelligence is not reactive, it is anticipatory. Rule 1 is the only shield we have. As night approached, the humans activated a series of low-energy lights that bathed the valley in soft luminescence. Shadows stretched across the landscape, and Zyren observed how the humans adapted seamlessly to the changing conditions. Even in darkness, they maintained their precision, their coordination, and their composure. The small species of Virelia, though clever and agile, could not match such effortless competence. A debate stirred between Zyren and Morag. Zyren's mind, hungry for knowledge, argued for subtle interference, using distraction or diversion to gauge human responses. Morag, however, insisted on restraint. We survive by restraint, not cunning. Do you not see? One act of interference could expose us entirely. Humans are not fooled, Zyren. Their patience allows them to see through even the smallest deception. Zyren's resolve wavered. He remembered his first encounter with humans, the subtle lesson etched into his memory. Humans were unpredictable, capable of thinking and reacting far beyond the instincts of his species. Yet he also saw the beauty in their methods, the intelligence and care, the way they molded the environment to their purpose without unnecessary destruction. There was a lesson here, not in confrontation, but in humility. A sudden flash of movement caught his eye. One human, wandering near the edge of the mapped area, paused and scanned the trees, his gaze sharp. Zyren held his breath, fully exposed, wondering if this moment would mark their discovery. Yet the human only tilted his head, assessed the situation with unspoken logic, and returned to his task. It was as if he sensed the presence of another species without acknowledging it, a silent acknowledgement of existence, and a subtle warning of awareness. Zyren felt a mixture of fear and awe. Humans could dominate without force, control without coercion. To provoke them was not merely dangerous, it was unthinkable. Their minds operated in a space where his species' cleverness and cunning were mere shadows. He understood, finally, why Rule 1 existed. It was not a guideline. It was a survival imperative. The valley's ambient hum deepened as the humans' devices pulsed in rhythmic patterns, casting the entire landscape into a symphony of light and energy. Zyren crouched, watching, absorbing, and learning. Each human movement was a lesson in patience, adaptability, and subtle control. Every misstep he had considered before now seemed reckless, foolish, dangerous. "Morok," he whispered, antennae brushing the cool night air. "I see it now. There is no second rule. Our survival depends entirely on respect, observation, and humility." Morok's eyes glimmered in the dim light. "And that, Zyren, is the essence of Virelia's survival. We endure not because we are stronger, but because we recognize forces greater than ourselves and step aside. Observation is our only weapon, patience our only shield." The humans continued their work, oblivious to the tiny observers. Zyren felt a profound mixture of relief and fear, relief that they had not been discovered, fear of the intelligence that loomed just beyond his comprehension. His species had learned a harsh truth. To survive in the presence of humans was to acknowledge a power that transcended size, speed, or cleverness. As the night deepened, the valley quieted, leaving only the soft hum of the humans' instruments. Zyren withdrew to the safety of higher cliffs, Morok following silently. The lesson was clear, etched into his consciousness. Provocation was not merely foolish, it was fatal. Rule 1 was absolute. There was no second rule. There could be no second rule. And in the shadowed depths of the valley, humans moved with deliberate purpose, unaware of the fragile, watchful eyes that had witnessed their patience, their intelligence, and their unyielding power. Zyren realized that the next challenge would not be the humans' actions, but his own restraint. The valley was quiet, yet every shadow seemed alive with possibility. Zyren perched atop the highest ridge, antennae quivering as he observed the humans moving through the alien landscape. Morok remained beside him, a silent pillar of caution and wisdom. The humans had worked steadily since dawn, their instruments humming with quiet authority, mapping, analyzing, and cataloging the terrain with a patience that made Zyren's species feel fragile in comparison. "They're approaching the northern crevices," Zyren whispered, his compound eyes fixed on the figures below. "Closer than ever before." Morok's gaze followed. "Stay hidden. Observation only. That is rule 1. Our survival depends on it." Zyren nodded, though his mind raced. Curiosity battled caution, a familiar struggle that now carried heavier stakes. Every instinct in him screamed to flee, yet part of him wanted to witness everything, to understand humans fully before retreating. He realized now that any misstep would not provoke anger alone. It could unravel everything they had preserved for centuries. The humans paused near a cluster of luminescent flora, instruments scanning the environment. One man bent closer to the glowing leaves, gently touching them as if weighing their significance. Another tapped a sequence on a device, and a soft hum filled the valley. Zyren's heart pounded. The human's awareness was not limited to brute strength or technology. It extended to subtle observation, perception, and judgment. They moved through the alien world with respect and precision, yet with the quiet authority of masters. A sudden movement caught the human's attention, a flicker of shadow, perhaps a small creature. Zyren froze. Morok's voice, calm yet tense, reminded him, "They notice everything, Zyren. Patience and restraint are our only shields." One human stepped closer to the shadow, scanning the trees, eyes sharp, fingers poised on a scanner. Zyren held his breath, expecting detection, confrontation, perhaps even destruction. But instead, the human merely tilted his head, studied the area for a moment, and then returned to the original task. Zyren's chest tightened. Their awareness was absolute, yet their reaction measured. They judged without aggression, responded without haste. "It's incredible," Zyren murmured. "They could see me, and yet they did not act. They could have, but they chose restraint." "Exactly," Morok said. "That restraint is their strength. Their patience and intelligence surpass any physical power. Remember this, Zyren. To provoke them is fatal. To respect them is survival." As the humans moved closer to the ridge, Zyren felt a flicker of panic. They were almost beneath him now. One of the men paused, glanced upward, and for a brief moment, Zyren thought he had been seen. The human's gaze lingered on the ridge's edge, where the tiny Virelians crouched. Yet after a heartbeat, the man turned back, adjusting his instruments and continuing with deliberate care. Zyren's relief was mingled with awe. Humans did not need to exert force to dominate. Their intelligence alone commanded the world around them. Morag placed a reassuring hand on Zyren's shoulder. You see now, don't you? Observation, humility, restraint. That is all that keeps us alive. Zyren nodded, feeling a profound shift within him. The thrill of curiosity, the desire to test limits, had been replaced by understanding. Humans were not merely strong, they were masters of perception and patience. Their presence demanded respect, their intelligence demanded caution. And in that realization lay the only path to survival. The humans finished their work, carefully packing instruments, leaving behind traces of their presence but no harm. One man, the apparent captain, lingered for a moment, scanning the valley with a deliberate calm. It was as if he sensed the tiny observers in the shadows, acknowledging their existence without confrontation. Zyren watched, humbled and aware of his species' limitations. They're leaving, Zyren whispered. And we are still here, unseen, unharmed. Yes, Morag replied, because we followed Rule 1. Never provoke humans. That is the only rule. There is no second rule. Remember it always. As the human ship lifted off, glowing against the twilight sky, Zyren felt a mixture of fear, respect, and awe. The Virelians had survived not through strength or cunning, but through observation, patience, and humility. They had glimpsed the full measure of humans, their intelligence, restraint, and unyielding adaptability. Zyren turned to Morag. I understand now. It is not brute force that makes them powerful, it is their ability to anticipate, to judge, to act with precision. They do not need to strike to command the world around them. Morag's eyes glimmered in the fading light. That is the essence of survival in their presence. And perhaps the essence of why our species endures, through restraint, awareness, and respect for powers greater than our own. As the last traces of the human ship disappeared into the distance, Zyren made a silent vow. The survival guide would be updated, the lesson recorded. Rule 1 is the only rule. Never provoke humans. Observation, patience, humility, these are the keys to enduring their presence. The valley settled into quiet once more, bathed in the soft glow of bioluminescent plants. Zyren and Morag lingered on the ridge, tiny figures in a vast, awe-inspiring landscape. For the first time, Zyren felt the weight of his species' place in the universe, small, clever, cautious, and alive, because they had respected a force far greater than themselves. And somewhere, deep in the cosmos, humans continued their journey, oblivious to the lesson they had imparted, yet leaving a mark upon the Virelians that would endure for generations. Zyren watched until the stars filled the sky, a mixture of relief, reverence, and wonder settling over him. He understood now. Survival was not merely living, it was learning, respecting, and knowing when to remain invisible. And in that knowledge, the small species of Virelia had found its way to endure another cycle, untouched, unprovoked, and wiser than before.